And so if we canter gently across to the next paddock and have a look at decision quality under uncertainty, we've just identified geopolitical uncertainty, uncertainty from a corporate perspective, uncertainty from an entrepreneurial perspective, and of course the uncertainty that surrounds us all given the current environment in which we're operating. Decision quality under uncertainty, Rick, how do we get better at it? How does that play out? What's your model for the listener and the viewers of this podcast?
There's an interesting book that I'm currently plowing through. It's called Noise. And it's written by three folks in the behavioral economics world, including Daniel Kahneman, who, won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work in this field. And Noise makes the case that decisions are influenced by two factors that are equally pernicious. One is bias, which behavioral economics has tended to focus on, and we can talk about some of those things in a second. But this book highlights, I think, in some very strong ways that the other thing that impacts decisions is noise. That a lot of what you think is valuable, a lot of what you think is important is actually just noise. And figuring out a way to extract that noise in the data set can go a long way toward improving the quality of the decisions that you make. So, like I said, I'm only halfway through this thing. I just recently discovered it. A friend of mine turned me on to it. So it'll be interesting to see how the learnings from Daniel's latest book inform some of the work that we do with early stage founders. Because, like I said, right now it's focused very heavily on the kinds of biases that behavioral economics has identified. Things like we've talked about, one, confirmation bias, right? This notion that we tend to really grasp onto the data or the information that we think we have that supports a view we've already gotten. There's the notion of anchoring, which is the very first piece of data that you get on a particular subject kind of sets the tone. So if the first thing you hear about a movie is negative, you're likely to think it's negative even when you go to see it. And if the first thing you hear is positive, then you get excited and you tend to think positively about it. That applies not just for movies, it applies for just about everything you might stumble across. And then there are things like the sunk cost fallacy and the danger of groupthink. And there's just a whole range of things that go on that we know impact the way people make decisions. And, and as Dan Ariely and others have said, the problem with knowing all this stuff is it doesn't mean you're still not susceptible to it, right? We still get into situations and then looking back after the fact go, oh my gosh, look what we just did. We just did what we said we weren't going to do, or we weren't going to be, we were going to be particularly careful about that issue. And so one of the things that we do in this decisioning process to help people make better decisions is we've done I think in our first conversation about this stuff, we talked about the role kind of emerging as a happy curmudgeon. What we've really done is done a much better job of formalizing it into something that looks very much like a devil's advocate role that the Catholic Church used to have, right? The idea that somebody is specifically tasked with coming up with the conversation, the data, the information, the arguments about why you shouldn't do something that you're about to do.
One of the effects of this whole crisis and crisis similar to it is that particularly smaller operators are finding themselves with a huge amount to deal with, a very limited window of opportunity, resilience issues, and the need for greater capacity around their thinking processes. And this is something that we've identified with our executive decision acceleration model, and come in and really support small teams who are finding that they need additional thinking time, capacity, and impartial, objective, independent, and highly informed and professional advice, bringing in with our strategic partners capabilities for change, industrial relations, and so forth. So we're there to support you at any time. And if you'd like to just contact us, our telephone number is also on the website, or you can email us, and we'll be delighted to see when and where we can help you through this crisis.